He wore a faded baseball cap pulled low over his brows, a flannel shirt with worn-out shoulders, jeans washed thin by time, and a 3-day stubble on his chin. He looked more like a long-haul trucker stopping by a rest stop than a businessman. No one in the diner recognized that the man was Nathan Greaves, the founder and CEO of Greaves Diner, once renowned for his philosophy of a diner for everyone, when for nearly 15 years, Nathan had grown a modest roadside eatery into a culinary empire with 5 branches, hundreds of employees, and thousands of loyal customers. But today, he returned to the very first location, the place where it all began, for a reason no one would have guessed. Something had changed. The profits were still steady. The number of customers hadn't dropped, but the turnover rate was unusually high. Customer reviews were still positive, yet they lacked something, that special feeling of home, like family, that he had worked so hard to cultivate. And stranger still, this very branch, Nathan's proudest achievement, had become the fastest declining location in revenue last quarter, despite being in a prime spot. Something's not right, Nathan thought to himself as he pushed open the familiar glass door. The bell chimed overhead like it always did, but no one looked up. A server strode past him, arms full of steaming plates, not sparing him a glance. A cashier was punching numbers into the register, twirling her hair with bored fingers. In a strange, disquieting moment, Nathan realized he had become invisible in the very place he had built. "Just one, please," he said, lowering his voice and roughening it a bit to avoid recognition. "Counter, okay?" the waitress asked, eyes never leaving her notepad. "That's fine." Nathan nodded, then made his way to the last seat at the counter where he could observe the entire diner. The scent of freshly baked pies lingered in the air. The soft hum of the coffee grinder came from the kitchen corner. Everything seemed fine. But within just a few minutes of watching, he felt the rhythm of the place was off. Too many whispers, eyes that quickly darted away, a quiet chill weaving its way through the crowded tables. And then his gaze landed in the kitchen corner. An older man, thin and wiry, was carefully scrubbing plates one by one with an unusual kind of patience. No one was hurrying him. No one even seemed to see him. Yet he worked silently, steadily, as if the entire diner depended on him. His name was Henry Lawson, as shown on the faded name tag pinned to his apron. His hair was snow white, his arms thin and sinewy, and each of his steps carried a slight slowness, but not weakness. There was something about Henry that Nathan couldn't look away from. While the younger staff laughed and joked behind the counter, this elderly man gave quietly, bit by bit, without complaint, without acknowledgement. "How long has he been working here?" Nathan asked softly as the cashier, her name tag read, Megan, came to take his order. She shrugged, not even bothering to look up. "Since the dinosaurs. Probably. Should have retired ages ago, if you ask me." Nathan said nothing. As Megan brought his coffee, his eyes stayed fixed on Henry, the dishwashing man who never seemed to pause, even though his apron was soaked and his back curved a little more with every dip to lift a plate. And then it happened. A young mother with 2 small children approached the register and said something that made Megan's face fall. Megan called over another employee, Troy, and the 2 of them began whispering with clear irritation. The mother looked uncomfortable, lowering her head, while the children tugged nervously at her sleeve. The air grew heavier, more strained. From the kitchen corner, Henry saw what was happening. He quietly dried his hands, stepped forward, and pulled out his wallet, handing Megan a few folded bills. The mother threw her arms around him, choking back tears of gratitude. Troy muttered something. Nathan heard it clearly. 3rd time this week, that old fool. Megan scoffed with a dry laugh. He's poorer than they are. Sleeps in that wreck of a car and still plays hero. At that moment, Nathan Greaves tightened his grip on the coffee mug until his hand trembled slightly. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but he knew one thing for sure. Someone here was living with quiet grace, and someone else was playing a dirty game, and he would stay until he uncovered the truth. As the afternoon rolled in, the crowd grew thicker. Waiters rushed between tables, the chef shouted out orders, and the cash register chimed non-stop. But in a quiet corner, amidst the clamor and chaos, Henry continued washing dishes, steady as a living clock. Nathan sipped his coffee, never taking his eyes off the old man. Beneath the faded shirt and nearly worn-through shoes, Henry moved as though he knew every crack in the kitchen floor. A tray full of dishes crashed down near his feet. Water splashing everywhere. Henry didn't flinch. He simply bent down and wiped it clean. Those weathered, stained hands still carried a quiet elegance. Toward the end of the lunch shift, as the crowd began to thin, Nathan stood up and casually walked toward the restroom area, but stopped by the dishwashing station. He tapped gently on the counter, and Henry looked up, his eyes bright beneath thick, snow-white brows. "Thank you for what you did earlier," Nathan said softly, referring to the moment with the young mother. "I saw it." Henry offered a gentle smile and wiped his hands on his apron. "Sometimes a hot meal is all someone needs to get through the day," he replied. "I used to be the one on the other side of that counter. I know what that feels like." "So, how long have you been working here?" Nathan asked, pretending to be just another curious customer. Henry shrugged, his eyes still on the stack of waiting dishes. "About 7 years, since my wife passed." Nathan nodded slightly, not pressing further. Instead, he said, "Not many people have the patience to wash dishes for that long." Henry paused for a moment. "It's not patience, it's choice. At my age, I don't have many options left, but I can still choose how I live." The answer left Nathan silent. A way of living. No business school teaches that. Just then, Megan walked by, raising an eyebrow with a mocking smirk. "Careful not to soak your shoes, sir. The floor gets real slippery, especially with the old man washing dishes like it's raining back there." Henry offered a soft chuckle, saying nothing. Nathan returned to his seat, a heavy weight settling in his chest. What he had just witnessed wasn't just a moment of rudeness. It was a slow, corrosive kind of disregard, so ingrained it had become routine. And the one being dismissed was the only person here who truly understood what service meant. A few minutes later, when a young waitress fumbled and dropped an entire tray of orange juice, Henry was the first to rush over. He gently helped her up, reassured her with a kind word. then got down on his knees to mop up the spill without a single complaint. Troy passed by, muttering, "There he goes again, St. Henry. One of these days, he's gonna screw something big up." Nathan turned to the man sitting next to him, an older gentleman stirring his tea. "Is Henry always like that?" Nathan asked. The man, his name was Ron, nodded. "I come here almost every day. Henry's the kindest soul in this place. Lost his wife to cancer. Sold everything he had to pay the hospital bills. Never complains. Never takes a handout." Nathan thanked him, then turned back to his now cold coffee. A single resounding question echoed in his mind. How can someone that kind live among people so willing to mock and deceive him? As the afternoon faded and the crowd thinned, the evening staff began trickling in. Still, Nathan hadn't left. Henry should have clocked out by now, but instead, he was hunched over, cleaning the kitchen area, doing the job that belonged to the next shift. Patricia, the shift manager, stepped out of the office, walked past Henry without a word of thanks. She just tossed out a short remark. "Henry, go home. No one's paying you for extra hours." Henry replied softly. Jake called out, "I'll finish this up." Nathan watched Patricia's face. Unbothered, unquestioning. She was used to the old man picking up others' slack as if it were just expected. By the time the clock struck 5, the last rays of daylight streamed through the windows. Henry remained at the sink, tirelessly scrubbing. Across the counter, Megan and Troy had their heads close together, whispering. Nathan didn't need to hear the words. The way they glanced toward Henry, the sly smirks curling on their faces, it told him enough. Something bad was being planned, and it involved Henry. It was fully dark when Nathan finally left the diner. He sat in his car for a long while, quietly watching the back door of the restaurant where Henry had just exited, hauling a heavy bag of trash in his arms. Henry's car, just as Megan had said, was a beat-up old Buick, rust creeping all along its underside. Nathan didn't take his eyes off it as it turned onto a narrow dirt road behind the shopping complex, nearly disappearing beneath the thick canopy of trees. Curiosity tugged at him, and he quietly followed at a distance. At the end of the road was an empty lot scattered with gravel and debris, where a few abandoned cars sat idle and a dilapidated trailer crouched as if hiding from the world. No lights on. The wooden door sagged from its hinges. Henry climbed the wobbly steps and had to shove the door open with his shoulder. Nathan sat in his car, a tight knot twisting in his chest. He hadn't imagined it, this man who caught every falling tray, wiped every spill, handed over his last dollars to customers short on change, lived like this. The next morning, Nathan returned to the diner even earlier. Henry was already there, quietly wiping down the stove with a faded cloth. Watching him move, Nathan noticed something. The man was in pain. Every time he bent over, Henry unconsciously placed a hand on his lower back, rubbing gently. His hand trembled slightly whenever he gripped a grease-covered pot. And Megan and Troy, they walked in together, laughing loudly. But there was nothing innocent in their eyes. Every glance, every gesture toward Henry carried something calculated. Nathan ordered a slice of pie and coffee, sitting at his usual spot, the table near the register. He held a newspaper in his hands, but his ears were tuned to every word around him. During a lull in customer traffic, Troy leaned on the counter and muttered in a voice low enough to sound secretive, yet loud enough for Nathan to hear. "He's been here 7 years. 7 years washing dishes." Megan let out a scoffing laugh. "Yeah, and playing hero too. Yesterday, he pulled cash out of his own pocket for that single mom." Troy smirked. "With that dishwashing salary, he probably lives on cat food. Not that he has a house. That rust bucket of his is home." Megan tilted her head. "Probably sleeps behind the Walmart or in a cardboard box." They laughed. Nathan didn't. His grip tightened around the coffee mug. His eyes burned through the newspaper. As if he could shatter the counter, those two stood behind with just his glare. He had built Greaves' Diner with a simple dream, a place where everyone was treated with respect, customers and staff alike, a community, a home. But what he was hearing now was the sound of something rotting beneath the surface, quietly corroding every brick he had laid. And then the thing he feared most happened. Troy leaned in and whispered, but this time Nathan shifted just close enough to catch every word. "That missing cash from the register the last few days. Perfect timing. The boss is starting to notice. If we find a few more discrepancies and just so happen to spot the old man near the till," Megan picked it up, eyes gleaming, "then we've got our evidence. Just say, he stole it to pay for someone's meal." "Easy as pie." Troy nodded, grinning. "And once he gets fired for theft, I'll slide my cousin in. Works twice as fast. We split the referral bonus." Megan beamed. "And no more looking at St. Henry's holier-than-thou face every day." In that moment, Nathan understood everything. They didn't hate Henry. They envied him. They envied him because customers adored him. They envied the trust he inspired, something they could never manufacture. And they envied that even with nothing to his name, Henry lived a life far more meaningful than anything they had ever managed. He wasn't just a target to be removed. He was a mirror they couldn't stand to look into. Nathan rose from his seat, leaving the coffee half finished, and walked briskly out of the diner. Not to walk away, but to begin planning. Tomorrow, he would set a trap, not for Henry, but for those trying to push him into the pit. That afternoon, Nathan didn't return to the office. He sat in his car, his phone buzzing with one call after another. The first call was to the district manager, Patricia, to confirm what he already suspected. Yes. The security camera system at this location had been broken for nearly 3 months. No budget to replace it. No report ever made its way to him. The second call was to an old contact in a local community support organization. Nathan didn't want to hire an actor. He wanted someone real, someone with a genuine story, so that no one would doubt the authenticity of the situation he was about to create. And then he called Jessica Miller, a single mother of 2, working 2 part-time jobs, and a past recipient of aid from his community foundation. Nathan asked her just one question. "Would you be willing to help me expose something unjust if it meant restoring fairness for someone else?" Jessica didn't ask for details. She agreed immediately. The next morning, Nathan returned to Greaves' diner even earlier than Henry. He took his usual seat right-hand corner near the register. The newspaper was open, as always, but his eyes watched everything from behind its faded print. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Jessica walked in, holding the hand of her young daughter Lily, around 5 years old, wearing shoes a bit too big and a coat with neatly sewn patches along the sleeves. She placed a modest order, a grilled cheese sandwich for her daughter, and a small bowl of soup for herself. Megan took the order, her smile robotic and void of warmth. About 20 minutes later, Jessica stepped up to the register to pay. Nathan noticed how she carefully counted out her coins, anxiety etched across her face. "I'm so sorry." Jessica's voice trembled. "I thought I had enough, but I'm short $15. My bank card was frozen yesterday." Megan blinked, her face hardening. "We don't give out free meals, ma'am. Next time, check your wallet before placing an order." Jessica bowed her head, her voice pleading. "Is there any way? I could wash dishes or clean tables to make up the difference. I just need a few more days." Nathan quietly looked around the diner. No one spoke up. A few customers glanced over. Little Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve, confused. And then, just as if following a script, Henry stepped forward. Without a single word of judgment, without a trace of irritation. He simply pulled an old wallet from his apron pocket, slipped out a $20 bill, and laid it on the counter. "No need to wash anything, young lady. Just pay it back next time. Everyone's come up short at some point." Jessica choked back tears. "Thank you. I promise I'll pay you back." "When I get my paycheck, I'll come right back." Henry smiled and bent down toward little Lily. "Did you like the sandwich? Was it better than the one at home?" Lily nodded, her eyes lighting up. That simple moment, just a few seconds, swept away the heavy tension in the room. But for Nathan, he knew the worst was still on its way. Everything unfolded exactly as he had predicted. Not 10 minutes later, Troy appeared at the counter, whispering to Patricia, who was busy reviewing receipts. "You might want to check drawer 1. I noticed something odd earlier." Patricia, her face already tight from a week of financial stress, immediately went to inspect it. Megan joined them, her expression feigning sudden recollection. "I saw Henry hanging around the register when I went to the back. I think it was right after that customer couldn't pay." "Are you saying Henry took the money?" Patricia asked, her voice now filled with both doubt and discomfort. Troy shrugged, putting on an air of reluctant concern. "I don't want to believe it either, but there are some things you just can't keep ignoring." Nathan remained still in his seat, but inside, anger surged like molten lava. Every glance, every calculated word from Megan and Troy felt like a knife driving into the trust he had once placed in his team. Patricia clenched her hands, muttering to herself, "If money keeps disappearing, and if you two are the ones who witnessed it again, I have to do something." And Nathan knew if he didn't act by tomorrow, Henry would lose the one place that had been keeping him afloat. So he wouldn't wait until tomorrow. He would end it on tomorrow with every piece of evidence in hand. A single blow, undeniable, inescapable. That night, instead of returning to his usual luxury condo, Nathan remained seated in an old sedan borrowed from the company garage. He parked across the street, headlights off, eyes fixed on the back door of Greaves' diner, where Henry still hadn't left, even though his shift had ended over an hour ago. The back door finally creaked open. In the dim light, Henry appeared, carrying a large trash bag, his back hunched noticeably. Each step he took was heavy, weary, but still no complaints. No one beside him, only the whisper of the night wind and the faint scuff of old shoes on cold concrete. Nathan started the car engine, keeping just the right distance. Henry's Buick sputtered to life after a few coughing starts, its tail lights flickering weakly. Nathan didn't turn on his own lights, he just quietly followed, corner by corner, down the empty back streets. The car left the residential area, cutting through narrow, unlit roads, and then, just as before, turned down the dirt alley behind the row of warehouses Nathan had scouted the night before. Henry stopped the car. No one got out with him. No one waited for him inside the trailer. Only darkness and solitude. The frail old man climbed the 3 rickety wooden steps, using his shoulder to force open the stiff, weathered door. When the light inside flicked on a weak yellow glow from a bare overhead bulb, Nathan could see everything, a cramped space barely big enough to breathe in, where the kitchen, bed, and refrigerator were crammed into one corner, as if trying to make room for a human presence. No air conditioning, no TV, just a single framed photo of a woman on the table, likely his wife. Nathan parked only a few dozen feet away, but his vision blurred, as though the distance between them was an entire world, one no one should have to live in. A world Henry had quietly endured for 7 years with no one knowing, no one asking. The next morning, Nathan arranged to meet Ron, the elderly customer he had spoken with a few days prior, the one who always sat at the table by the wall and ordered the same cup of tea. At a small cafe near the park, Nathan, still dressed in plain clothes, cap pulled low, sat across from Ron, his voice dropping low. "Does Henry really live in that trailer behind the diner?" Ron nodded, his eyes softening. After his wife passed, Henry sold the house, cashed out his pension, poured everything into her treatment. They were together for 52 years. He never hesitated as long as it gave her more time. Nathan swallowed hard, and after she died, he kept sending money to the hospital every month, said it was a debt of honor. That trailer, it's all he could afford while still keeping that promise to her. Nathan's hand clenched around his coffee cup. Ron continued, his voice gentler. "He has a daughter in Seattle, Sarah. She's begged him to come live with her. But Henry said no, didn't want to be a burden, said, 'Someone here needs him more.'" Nathan paused. Who? Customers, co-workers, hungry kids, the people he quietly helps every day. For Henry, helping others, that's how he keeps going. In that moment, the entire cafe seemed to fall silent. Nathan stared out the window where the morning light filtered through the trees, but inside, he felt darker than ever. He had failed. It wasn't failure because of revenue. It was failure because he had let someone like Henry live in pain, endure humiliation, and suffer in silence while those who schemed and sneered held their heads high behind the register. He whispered to himself, "If I don't act, I don't deserve to be the founder of this place anymore." And this time, he didn't just plan. He prepared something no one would see coming. The next morning, Greaves' diner began its day like any other. But the atmosphere had shifted. Nathan arrived early, settling into his usual seat, the same cap pulled low, the same plain clothes, but today he wasn't just observing. Today he was stepping into a part of the story he had once chosen to overlook. Henry walked in at exactly 6:45 a.m. His eyes looked a little sunken from a restless night, yet they still carried that familiar calm. Nathan noticed he was moving slower than the day before, his left arm trembling slightly as he lifted a bin of rinsed vegetables. The pain in his back was more visible and still. Not a single person seemed to notice. Troy and Megan walked in shortly after, laughing like it was just another beautiful day. They had no idea this would be the last day they'd ever step foot in this place as employees. At exactly 9 a.m., Nathan left the diner, but not to avoid anything. He went straight to the local hospital, the very one where Henry had been quietly sending money each month to pay off his late wife's medical bills. The financial officer, after reviewing the records, confirmed that a payment of $150 to $200 had been sent every month without fail from Henry Lawson. The original debt had been over $80,000, nearly $40,000 still remained. "He's never missed a payment," the woman said softly, "and he always includes a note. This is my promise to Martha." Nathan froze. Martha was his wife. Yes, and he did something else I'll never forget. What was it? He sends a birthday card every year to the lead physician. Inside, it says, "Thank you for giving me 8 more months with the most wonderful woman I've ever known." The hospital staff member looked at Nathan, her voice tight with emotion. He has nothing left, but he's kept every promise he ever made. Nathan left the hospital in silence. That afternoon, he returned to the diner, carrying a large envelope. Inside were copies of Henry's complete medical payment records and a handwritten letter Nathan had stayed up all night writing. But before he did anything else, there was one more person he needed to speak to. As the evening light stretched across the surface of the lake on the city's west side, Nathan sat on a stone bench in the park, phone in hand. On the other end, a woman's voice came through, shaky and surprised. "What did you say?" "My father? Is he okay? I call every week, and he always says everything's fine." Nathan took a deep breath. "Sarah, this is Nathan Greaves, owner of Greaves' Diner. I'm calling because I believe it's time you knew the truth." He told her every detail about the trailer, about the meal the dishwashing old man gave to a stranger, about the moment he pulled a wallet from his apron, hands still wet from soap, and gave without hesitation. And then he paused. His voice broke. "He never shows weakness. But I know he's hurting, and he needs you." Sarah was silent on the other end. After a long pause, she spoke softly. "I've begged my dad to come live with me so many times, but he always said no. Now I understand. It's not that he didn't need me. It's that he thought he had nothing left to give," Nathan replied, his voice steady. "He's already given the world through a kindness most people can't even fathom. Now it's time the world gives something back." Sarah choked up. "I'll fly out as soon as I can. But Do you think he'll be angry with me that he thinks I stopped caring? No, Nathan said, smiling through quiet tears. He doesn't think that. He's just waiting for someone to tell him that love is never a burden. That night, Nathan returned to the trailer. He didn't knock. He simply left a box of warm pastries and a handwritten note. You don't know who I am, but I've seen you, and tomorrow the whole world will see too. Henry wouldn't understand. But come morning, everything would change, not just for him, but for all of Greaves' Diner. Tuesday morning at Greaves' Diner began with the illusion of normalcy. But only Nathan Greaves knew this would be no ordinary day. He had spent the entire night planning down to every last detail. And today, every move, every reaction inside the diner was part of his design. At 7:30 a.m., he took his usual seat. Same disguise, faded baseball cap, worn flannel shirt, a face that blended into the crowd of customers. But this time, his eyes weren't just observing, they were monitoring. Megan arrived first, carrying a large tote bag, lips painted bold, striding quickly to the counter. Troy followed right behind, smirking, patting her on the shoulder like two conspirators walking into a guaranteed win. Henry, as always, arrived quietly. His old car pulled into the lot behind the diner. He walked in with a small lunchbox in hand, bowing politely to everyone, even though no one returned the gesture. His shirt today looked cleaner than usual, perhaps because he knew today was Patricia's scheduled inventory check. That, of course, was why Troy and Megan had chosen today to execute the final part of their plan. At 9:50 a.m., a young woman entered the diner, holding the hand of her little daughter. Her name was Jessica Miller, the same woman Nathan had quietly approached days earlier. But today, she wasn't playing a role. She was a single mother working 2 jobs, trying to live with dignity in an unforgiving city. And little Lily, 5 years old, frail, her hair tied into 2 neat pigtails, was her daughter. Jessica stepped up to the counter. We'll just have a grilled cheese for her and a small bowl of soup for me. Megan smiled, but her eyes were cold as steel. Roughly 20 minutes later, Jessica returned to the register, just as planned. She patted her pockets, checked her wallet, and lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, I don't have enough cash. My card stopped working yesterday. Megan's demeanor changed instantly. This is a restaurant, Mom, not a charity kitchen. You should have thought about that before placing an order. Jessica pleaded, voice shaking. Is there any way I could work it off? I'll repay every cent. Please don't humiliate my daughter. The entire diner fell into silence. All eyes turned to the register. And then, just like the 3 times before, Henry stepped away from the dish pit and quietly made his way over. Without saying much, without a trace of hesitation, Henry reached into his wallet, pulled out exactly $15 and gently placed it on the counter. No need to work anything off, he said quietly. That little girl needs to eat. We've all needed help at some point. Jessica held his hand, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you so much. I won't forget this. From the corner of the diner, Nathan saw everything. He didn't need a recording. He didn't need a witness. Because the trap had just closed. Less than 10 minutes later, Troy appeared at the counter, his voice intentionally loud enough for customers to hear. "Patricia, I just checked the register, money's missing again." Patricia, still going over the books, looked up, startled. "Missing again. Third time this week. This morning. It's nearly $20. Right after that last payment." Megan stepped in, face serious. "I saw Henry near the till when I came back from the stockroom." Troy nodded in agreement. No one else was around. "And every time, it's right after he helps someone short on cash." Patricia tightened her grip on the ledger. "If this is true, we can't ignore it anymore." Nathan stood up from his table and quietly stepped outside. In his hand was a USB drive containing high-definition video and audio footage captured from the hidden camera he'd had installed 2 days earlier. At the exact moment Megan and Troy first whispered the details of their plan, no one inside the diner knew. The endgame had already begun. They thought today was just another shift, another morning. But today, right here at Greaves' Diner, justice would be served piping hot, leaving no room for escape. 10:45. Air. The air inside the diner was wound tight, like a string about to snap. Patricia, the manager, reviewed the books again, glancing repeatedly toward Troy and Megan, who now hovered nearby, pretending to be helpful investigators. According to the ledger, $37 was missing, a number that exactly matched the time and transaction involving Jessica. The mother, Henry, had helped only moments before. Troy stepped forward, his tone all professionalism. "I think maybe it's time we check the security footage, if someone's taking advantage of our kindness to cheat the company." Megan cut in, feigning reluctance to place blame. "I'm not saying it was Henry, but if we let this go on, the losses will keep growing, especially with someone who isn't great with money." Patricia clenched the ledger in her hands, lips pressed tight. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Clearly, part of her still didn't want to believe it, but the whispered suggestions, the conveniently matching numbers, they were slowly pushing her to the edge. And Henry, he remained hunched over the dish station, scrubbing away, completely unaware of the storm quietly forming behind his back. 11 to 10 a.m. Nathan returned, but this time, no disguise. He wore a crisp white shirt, no tie, and carried a small leather case in one hand. His gaze was sharp, focused. When the bell above the door rang, several staff members jumped. Even customers looked up. Patricia's mouth dropped open. "Mr. Greaves, I didn't know you were coming." Nathan cut her off. "No patience for pleasantries. I've been here for 3 days. You just didn't see me." He scanned the room, then walked straight to the counter. His voice was low, but it carried through every corner of the diner. "I need to speak with all staff." Right now, the entire diner went still, utter silence. Megan froze, her hands trembling slightly. Troy forced a grin, trying to stay composed. "Mr. Greaves, what an honor to have you here in person. We were just handling a situation involving missing cash." "Yes." Nathan nodded, voice calm but cutting. "And fortunately, I now have all the evidence, thanks to the newly installed and quietly installed camera system." He opened his case, pulled out a small device, and connected it to the TV mounted in the corner of the diner. The screen lit up crystal clear footage. It showed Troy intentionally entering the wrong amount into the register, then slipping the extra bills into his pocket. Moments later, Megan was seen deleting the transaction from the system after the customer had left. Then came the audio. Their voices, low but unmistakable. If we make it look like Henry just happened to be near the register, then when the money goes missing, guess who they'll blame first? The diner fell completely silent. A few customers visibly scowled in disgust. Some of the younger employees sat slack-jawed, stunned, and Henry, emerging slowly from the dish station, stood there, still unsure of what exactly was happening. Nathan turned, locking eyes with Patricia. "You were about to fire a man who lives in a trailer," Nathan said, his voice firm, eyes locked on Patricia. "A man who still sends money every single month to the hospital to pay off his late wife's medical debt. A man who has never missed a shift, never asked for overtime, and only ever requested one thing: to be allowed to help customers in need." He turned toward Troy and Megan, both now pale as ghosts. "And the two of you, not only did you steal from this business, you orchestrated an entire scheme to frame an innocent man. All because his kindness made you uncomfortable." Megan burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Troy raised his voice. "Desperate. That's not the whole story. We were just—" Nathan raised his hand, cutting him off. "Enough." He gave a small nod. Two plainclothes security officers stationed at the diner since morning stepped forward, flanking Megan and Troy on either side. Nathan turned to the customers. "I owe you all an apology. Not just for how my staff behaved, but because I, as the founder of this place, allowed the culture of this company to fall to its lowest point. You were about to fire a man who lives in a trailer," Nathan said, his voice firm, eyes locked on Patricia. "A man who still sends money every single month to the hospital to pay off his late wife's medical debt. A man who has never missed a shift, never asked for overtime, and only ever requested one thing: to be allowed to help customers in need." He turned toward Troy and Megan, both now pale as ghosts. "And the two of you, not only did you steal from this business, you orchestrated an entire scheme to frame an innocent man, all because his kindness made you uncomfortable." Megan burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Troy raised his voice. "Desperate. That's not the whole story. We were just—" Nathan raised his hand, cutting him off. "Enough." He gave a small nod. Two plainclothes security officers stationed at the diner since morning stepped forward, flanking Megan and Troy on either side. Nathan turned to the customers. "I owe you all an apology, not just for how my staff behaved, but because I, as the founder of this place, allowed the culture of this company to fall to its lowest point, as if none of it had anything to do with him, as if he had grown used to being misunderstood." Henry stood quietly, broom still in hand. Nathan stepped closer, his voice gentler now. "You don't have to keep going. Henry, not today. You don't have to wash another single dish." Slowly, Henry set the broom down. He lifted his head. His eyes were still bright, but something inside them had quietly shattered. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply said, "I didn't think anyone would believe me. But thank you for believing. Nathan walked to the center of the diner. All the staff, even Patricia, had instinctively formed a half-circle around the counter. Some customers had stayed. A few wiped away tears when they thought no one was watching. Nathan took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice clear and steady. I founded Greaves' Diner 15 years ago, not just to serve food. I wanted to build a place where people, whether they came to eat or came to work, felt like they mattered. He looked around the room, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I let profit, spreadsheets, and quarterly reports blind me to the people behind the uniforms. He turned back toward Henry. Henry Lawson reminded me why I started all this in the first place. Applause broke out, first from the guests, then from the staff. Nathan raised his hand, but not to speak. Instead, he reached into his case and pulled out a sky-blue envelope. He walked over to Henry and placed it gently on the counter beside him. Inside, this is the official letter, he said calmly. As of today, you are no longer a dishwasher. Henry furrowed his brow, visibly confused. Nathan smiled. You're going to be the face of Greaves' Diner's culture, not by title, but by heart. I want you to take on the role of community care supervisor for the entire company. A ripple of murmurs swept through the diner. Patricia held her breath. Nathan continued, This job won't require you to wash another dish, but it will require you to teach every one of my employees how to be kind when no one is watching. Henry stood still, quietly. He opened the envelope and read the letter. A trembling smile, part disbelief, part overwhelmed emotion began to rise at the corners of his lips. And this, Nathan said, pulling out a second envelope, this one, brown, is the deed to a small home, just 3 blocks from here. No mortgage, no payments. The house is yours. Everyone stood in stunned silence, and Henry stood as if frozen in place. I've also contacted the hospital, Nathan continued. Every cent of Martha's medical debt from the first day to the last has been paid in full. Under the name Henry Lawson, the kindest man I've ever known. This time, Henry couldn't hold it in. He sat down in the nearest chair, hands trembling, eyes brimming with tears. Why? He whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Nathan stepped closer and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Because while I was busy building walls, he said gently, you were the one keeping this place alive with a heart. Because while others faked kindness for gain, you practiced it quietly, when no one was watching and no one was paying. And then he spoke the final words, words that would later be retold every time someone asked how Greaves' Diner had changed forever. No one should be judged for how little they have, but everyone should be remembered if they ever dared to give when they had nothing. The entire diner erupted in applause. Henry, his eyes filled with tears, rose to his feet and bowed his head deeply. But this time, he was no longer the old man who washed dishes and lived in a trailer. He was a symbol, and the truth finally had stepped into the light. The next morning, Greaves' Diner opened as usual, but nothing was the same. The tables were still in their familiar places. The aroma of fresh coffee still lingered in the air, but within the hearts of those present, especially the morning shift staff, there was a quiet blend of shame and something warm they couldn't quite name. They no longer looked at Henry as the frail old man in the back corner of the kitchen. They saw him as someone who had been deeply wounded and still chose kindness. Henry arrived right on time, just like always. But this time, he didn't wear an apron. He wore a simple button-up shirt, clean khaki pants, and a brand new pair of shoes, the kind Nathan had quietly left for him in a gift box the night before. A few regulars, those who had witnessed it all yesterday, stood to greet him. One clapped him on the shoulder, another shook his hand. Someone handed him a small folded note with one line written in blue ink. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still matters." Henry could only smile, nod, and blink back the mist in his eyes. In the back office, Nathan stood beside Patricia, the manager, who had come so close to making the wrong call. "You don't need to say anything else," Nathan said gently. "We were all fooled, but what matters is how we respond once the truth is clear." Patricia lowered her head. "I want to make it right. I'll learn to listen better." Nathan nodded slightly. "Then start by learning from the one person who's always seen what the rest of us overlooked." Just then, the door opened. Henry stepped in. Nathan waved him over with a smile. "Mr. Henry, it's time to get to work. But this time, not at the dish pit." Patricia stepped forward and handed him a new assignment sheet along with a freshly printed employee badge that read, "Henry Lawson, Community Culture Supervisor." Henry held the badge in his hands, staring at it as if it couldn't possibly be real. "I don't have a degree, no leadership experience." Nathan smiled. "But you have something no school can teach: human value. And that's the only thing Greaves Diner will follow from this day forward." That afternoon, Henry walked from table to table, greeting guests, not as a server, but as the keeper of the diner's soul. He chatted with a little boy enjoying his pancakes, showed a new employee how to fold napkins neatly and with care, helped an elderly woman twist open a stubborn syrup cap, all the same things he had always done. But now, everyone noticed, and they appreciated it. A little while later, Jessica, the single mother who had played a role in Nathan's plan, returned with little Lily by her side. She was carrying an envelope. "I know you probably don't want this back," Jessica said, her voice gentle, "but it's just a small part. I've found a better job now. You didn't just help me. You helped my daughter believe in grown-ups again." Henry took the envelope in his hands, then smiled and handed it back. "Keep it. But I do have a suggestion." He pointed to the bulletin board near the counter, where a new sign had been pinned: "Henry Lawson Community Fund, helping hands when it's needed most. We'll start a small fund," he said, "for anyone in urgent need: medicine, baby formula, or just a warm meal." Jessica broke into tears and threw her arms around him. "You're the kindest person I've ever met." That same day, in his office, Nathan sat down and drafted an email to the entire Greaves Diner network. Starting next week, all Greaves Diner locations will implement the following: a living wage for every employee, full healthcare coverage, and an emergency assistance fund for staff facing hardship. We will no longer be just a restaurant chain. We will be a community that looks after its own." He hit send, then stood up, walked out of his office, and glanced through the glass window. Henry was kneeling beside a little girl who had just spilled her drink. No scolding, no frown, just a calm hand wiping the mess, and a gentle pat on her head. "It's all right," he said kindly. "Every day is a chance to begin again." Nathan smiled. Henry hadn't just come back to life. He had brought this place back with him. 1 week after the truth had come to light, Greaves' Diner continued to welcome customers as usual, but something was undeniably different. A quiet, yet profound shift had taken root. Gone were the indifferent glances when someone walked through the door. Gone were the whispered judgments behind the register about who couldn't pay. In their place, genuine smiles, lively good mornings. And at the heart of it all stood Henry Lawson, in a new role, yes, but still the same man, only now he wasn't invisible anymore. Henry didn't let his title change who he was. He still arrived early each morning, still greeted every person with a humble nod and a warm smile. But now, every step he took was watched not to monitor, but to learn. A new barista once asked him, "How do you remember every customer's name?" Henry just smiled. Because when someone hears their name, they know they've been seen. He taught the team how to fold napkins neatly, how to read a customer's expression to notice who might need help even when they don't say a word. He had lunch with new hires, listened quietly to stories about their families, their silent burdens, and always ended with a simple encouragement. People aren't machines, but kindness when practiced every day can be stronger than any machine ever built. The small house, just 3 blocks from the diner, had become Henry's new home. It wasn't big, but sunlight poured through the kitchen each morning. A framed photo of his wife hung by the window, and in the evenings, he watered the plants in his yard while neighborhood kids ran by shouting, "Mr. Henry, you still work at the diner, right? Did you bring cake?" He always smiled, and he always brought cake. Nathan still dropped by from time to time, not as a boss, but like a student. He'd sit and listen as Henry told stories about the days before dishwashers, or the final night he held his wife's hand in the hospital. Each story, whether heavy with sorrow or light with joy, always carried something valuable, something no business book would ever teach. Then one day, Henry arrived at the diner and noticed a new wooden frame hanging by the entrance. Inside was a still image taken from the security camera footage, that moment when Henry wiped tears from a little girl's cheek after paying for Jessica and Lily's meal. Beneath the photo, engraved in bold lettering, "We don't just serve food, we serve with compassion, just like Mr. Henry Lawson always has." He stood still before the frame. A new employee approached, hesitant. "Mr. Henry, do you ever feel sad that you spent your whole life just washing dishes?" Henry turned, and in his eyes there was no trace of the weariness that once lived in that old trailer. He smiled. "You've got it wrong, kid. I didn't spend my life washing dishes. I spent my life refusing to turn away when someone needed help." At 75, Henry Lawson didn't grow old. He simply became a quiet beacon, guiding a generation of workers by the light of his example. A local newspaper later ran a full-feature story about him, the man who lived in his car and changed an entire company. But Henry never talked about changing a company. He would simply say, "I'm not trying to change anyone. I just don't want to be the kind of person who sees pain and turns away." At the end of the day, when the diner quieted down, Henry often sat for a moment, gazing out the window. The evening light would settle on tabletops, wooden chairs, and the edge of a napkin someone forgot. And he'd smile, not because he got a promotion, not because he had a house now, not because people finally honored him, but because he no longer had to live in silence. The world had seen him, and the small things he used to do quiet, unnoticed, were now becoming something big in the hearts of those who watched. If you walk past Greaves' Diner today, it might look like just another family restaurant, but if you step inside, sit down, and listen to the gentle hum of conversations at the tables, you'll feel something different, not from the menu, not from the decor, but from the people, from how the staff remembers your name when you return for a second visit, from the quiet way they offer an extra lemonade to a coughing child, from the way an older man walks table to table, smiling and making every person feel seen. That man's name is Henry Lawson. He's not a businessman, not a speaker. He has no millions of followers, no TED Talks, but he's the reason a wealthy CEO woke up, why a company rewrote its policies, and why hundreds of employees learned to be humans before being workers. He is living proof of something people often dismiss as outdated or naive, that kindness, when done quietly, can be more powerful than any business strategy. You may never have lived in your car like Henry, may never have used your last few dollars to help a stranger, may never have been falsely accused because of your own compassion. But if you've ever felt small in a loud, fast world, if you've ever been looked down on for choosing kindness over convenience, if you've ever asked yourself, is it worth being good when no one notices? Then Henry Lawson's story is for you, not to make you admire him, but to help you believe in yourself. Because sometimes you don't need a stage, you just need to stand up when someone's being pushed down. You don't need a title, just the courage not to stay silent when someone needs to be heard. You don't need to be rich, just willing to share what little you have. At the moment it matters most. Henry never asked to be recognized, but today, every Greaves' Diner employee carries a piece of the legacy he left behind: courage, humility, and unwavering kindness. Nathan Greaves, the man who once built a successful restaurant chain, later said on national television, "I didn't teach Henry anything. He taught me how to be human while I was too busy trying to be a boss." So if you've ever believed you're too small to make a difference, remember this: Henry Lawson had only calloused hands, a grieving heart, and a kindness that never stopped. And he changed a company, a community, a generation. And maybe, just maybe, if you start today with one small act, one kind word, one gesture that expects nothing in return, you might be writing a story just like his, for yourself, and for someone out there who's still waiting for a reason to believe. If Henry's story moved you, share this video, let more people know. Sometimes the greatest thing you do is the thing you choose to do when no one is watching. Have you ever met someone like Henry? Tell us their story in the comments below.